Welcome, my name is Fred Speck. I'm the Director of Bands at the University of Louisville. Today I have with me musicians from the University of Louisville Wind Symphony, and we together are going to explore the topic of expressing the line in melody as it applies here in a first work by Steve Rouse called Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. I'd like to have Alex demonstrate for us part of this tune that will be familiar to all, and he's going to play it in an accurate but rather expressively neutral way. Okay, great. Now, if one were to look at his part, you'd see that essentially he's reading the dots on the page. But in this line, we notice that there are a lot of repeated tones that are part of the melody. 99 times out of 100, when you have repeated tones within a melody, if you create more stress through the repetitions or emphasis through repetition, that line will sound like a more mature rendering, whether that's by a ninth grader, a collegiate student, or a pro. Would you give us that version? Great. Now what we would like to imagine is that when all the players who have that line play that line in ensemble, that we have the same value interpretively of emphasis through repetition, and we'll do that for you. We'll begin at measure 9. Thank you. Another aspect of dealing with the melodic line is the vocal release. So we have emphasis through repetition that you heard, and also the vocal release. And what that does is relaxes the tone, as a vocalist might sing, if they are on an ending syllable of text, which is quite natural for them. Alex did it quite beautifully, but we weren't drawing attention to it. So if you would, Alex, once again, measures 11 and 12, and at the end of 12, you'll just hear his beautiful shaping of what we would call a vocal release. Yeah. So when he gets to what would be in the text, see, he allows a little bit of diminuendo on that tone, quite natural in a musical sense, and also creates space for other instruments that have counterpoint at the same time. We're going to move on and still build on that in a section that is led by a trumpet canon. And we'll start with the trumpet section at the pickup to 20. At 20, you'll hear all of these elements. You'll hear in there playing the nature of how a vocal release allows other lines of counterpoint to come through. You'll hear how they inform their line with emphasis through repetition, and you'll also notice that in these imitations, they're really striving to have the dialect, if you will, of the way each one of these gestures is spoken. The heads of this tune are all matching in their voices. So here we go, trumpet section. Great. So we get the idea there that within that line, if we were just reading in a very literal sort of way, then neither would the shapes come through as vividly, nor would the spaces of allowing little windows for the other lines to come through be as easy to hear. Let's take it, all of us, please. This canon is then magnified as it's not only in the trumpets, though they lead, but also through the winds and even the Glock. Let's just pick up to 20, all. Very good. Now we're going to move on to yet another topic that has to do with expressing the line, and that has to do with syncopation, but not necessarily the kind of syncopation that immediately sort of flashes into our sort of visual imagination when we think syncopation, but hidden or disguised syncopation, that which is implied. There's a really terrific setting called Elegy for Albinoni. It's the setting done by Shelley Hansen. It's listed as a grade 4 piece. And in this we can find some of these very examples. Near the beginning, in a flute passage, we'll hear Carrie first demonstrated in a rather accurate but neutral way, and then two other ways showing how using the implied syncopation can really change the way the listener hears the line. Very beautiful sounds, but we all sort of heard this as we listen in measure-to-measure increments. This time, Carrie, I'm going to ask you that wherever you read the implied syncopation, actually tie the note across the bar line and show us in your sound that you understand that by strengthening the intensity of it. Beautifully done. Now the version that couples both of those, the understanding of the strength and importance of the implied syncopation, but reading the articulations as written. Here we go. Gorgeously done. And the point of that as well is that when we have in the larger ensemble this melody doubled among other instruments, we must be even more vivid with the interpretation of that implied syncopation. Otherwise, it risks by mass being rather washed out. So we're going to play this segment starting at the beginning with the entire band. And we will play on, in fact, and as you listen, you will hear some other examples as you listen carefully to the use of the strength of implied syncopation in our melodic playing. Beginning. Thank you. Thank you, especially melody players, for making that a good example. And to those of you who have been listening in with us on this segment about line development and how to portray that. Emphasis through repetition, our first topic, the vocal release, and then finding the hidden or implied syncopation, and then making that an important expressive device. Hope that's of help. We enjoyed being with you today.